Hello my dear church boys and welcome back to yet another episode of St. Robert's Daygame podcast, and this time we are going to talk about sexual market value, but more in terms of the most popular reasons guys have for not succeeding in Daygame, in terms of SMB of course. So those are their age, their height and their race. But before we start touching these topics, let's address one thing that some of you might be thinking. Rob, you are 6'3", you're white and in your mid-30s. What the fuck do you know about Daygame for someone who is shorter or who is in his 50s or someone who is, I don't know, black, brown or whatever? Well, I've coached guys, very different types of students. Guys who are in their early 20s, guys who are in their late 50s, tall guys, short guys, white guys, black guys, brown guys, Asian guys. And by the way, when we are talking about brown guys here, brown is a very broad term and like it's an umbrella term where you can kind of put many things under this umbrella. I'm speaking about guys who themselves identify as being brown. So this mostly would apply to guys from India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, etc. And one thing I did to prepare for this podcast, because I had some ideas, especially about brown guys, why they believe it's a limiting factor in their day game and why some of them really are doing worse in day game. I had some ideas about that, but I reached out to a few brown day gamers who are pretty decent day gamers, and I asked their opinions, their views on this subject. So actually, while most of the conversation about age and height are really from my coaching experiences, most of the opinions when it comes to race will actually come from day gamers that I've spoken to. I've done a separate podcast episode with Mr. T about him day gaming in New York City as a black guy and how he really had to change some things about the way he dressed and behaved, and again, as I said, speaking with a few brown guys, and that really helped me understand better and deeper this question, and they actually had some insights that I had never thought about before that explained these challenges that they have in Daygame better than I understood them myself. And as always, before we jump into the podcast episode, a few updates about where I am, what's happening, coaching spots, etc. I'm in Santiago de Chile, on my way to Mexico via Lima, Peru. I hope that civil unrest doesn't influence my stay there. I'm gonna be chilling in Mexico until mid-April when I'll be going back to Europe to start the Europe Daygame season. I'm going to be starting the Europe coaching season in one of two. I have two places in mind. I don't know which one I'm going to yet, but both of them are, let's say, warm, full with beautiful, nice girls, and both of them are not that much on the day gamers' radar, so you're not gonna see a lot of competition there. I'll be spending some time in Riga, Latvia, which is the city where I'm originally from and one of my favorite Daygame cities in Europe. And I'm going to be doing a few Daygame trips to several cities in Poland. In each of those trips, I'm going to be taking 2 students with me. So if you already know that you want to learn Daygame in this season with me in Europe, then I'm going to be opening the pre-booking for coaching spots in Europe. If you're interested, what you can do is simply go to the description. There is a link to a page of coaching description where you can read everything about how coaching with me usually happens. You can fill the form at the bottom of the page, and I'm going to send you all the information, the cities that I'm planning to go to, the prices, the dates, etc. And then if everything sounds good, we're going to jump on a short WhatsApp call to talk details. And the second thing I want to talk about, we are soon opening or starting the 5th group of the Fast Track Daygamer group online coaching program. 2 full groups have finished the program. We have group 3 and 4 still going through the program. One of the guys finished his 4-month dry spell by getting 3 lays during this program. From the guys who went through the program, so first and second group, absolutely everyone has gotten Daygame dates. So they're doing way better than we actually expected when we started the program. And the program consists of two parts. Number one is weekly videos, so you know what exactly to focus on. There are so many things you need to learn when daygaming, but if you find a few ones that are the most important for the phase of daygame you are at that moment, you're going to be learning much faster. So every week I send everyone a few videos or materials, different types of materials, so they know what to focus on. They can prepare their homeworks, and then we have weekly coaching calls where they are staying accountable, doing their homework, discussing any other questions they have, and then of course taking a lot of action, and next week discussing what happened. Again, if you're interested in that, again, there's a link to find out more in the description of this podcast episode. And now let's talk about the effects of race, age, and height to your daygame results. SMB is a combination of many parts, and this is gonna be one of the biggest things I want you to understand from this podcast episode. One of the biggest things I want you to take away from it is that it's not just one thing, it's an equation, a sum of many different parts. And there are things you can really control and there are things you can't control. But regardless of what each component of SMB for you is like, really it's all about the sum. Because I've had guys who showed up for a conversation, for a consultation. They were thinking about getting coaching, and we sat down for a beer and chatted about everything. And I've had guys who show up and they look like models from a magazine cover. They're tall, really good looking, like have money, have status, they have everything. And with a guy like that, I've worked with several guys like that, and with some of them, even after coaching, they couldn't succeed in daygame. Why? Because while they had everything, they still weren't doing the work. They learned the game, they had good results while I was coaching them, but they hadn't learned the importance of doing the work, of showing up, of dedication on what it really takes to succeed in life. Because for some of these guys, everything has been handed on a silver platter. Maybe some of them are still living with their parents, even though they could afford to live on their own. They have good reasons for doing so. It's bad economic situation, whatever, like COVID, that you gotta think about your money, blah blah blah. But like, they haven't been kicked out of the nest, and they haven't learned to take full responsibility of their lives. And even though they had everything, it wasn't enough to succeed with girls, at least with the type of girls they wanted. And at the same time, I worked with a bunch of guys who are average looking, maybe with pretty bad social skills, pretty bad style. But if those guys did everything they could to improve their sexual market value, including learning game, these guys did much better than some of the really good rich guys that have everything in their life. Because there are so many components of sexual market value, even if you have all the standard things like height and you're, I don't know, like a white guy in New York City who has money and is tall and has status and everything, there are so many parts of this equation that if the other ones suck, then a guy who is a shorter guy with less social skills, with less social status and everything, if he fixes everything else, he will most likely do better than a really good looking guy who has everything going for him in his life. There, of course, are different components of your sexual market value, but let's talk about the most important ones, the bigger ones, at least in my eyes. So we're going to be talking, and the three bigger ones. Let's talk about first looks, which we will divide in several parts. We're going to talk about what Mother Nature has given to you, so that is your height, symmetry. I'm gonna put race under looks as well, and other things, of course. And we're gonna talk about the things in your looks that are something you can control. So your style, your grooming, your level of fitness. Under looks, maybe we can kind of squeeze in age as well. That's sort of related, but not really. And we're gonna talk about age, kind of problems that come with age and what you can do about them. Next, after the looks, we're gonna talk about status. And status, let's kind of divide it in two things. It's sort of wealth or having money and how that changes depending on how old you are. And we're gonna be talking about social status a little bit because a lot of guys like the idea of being an important figure in some sort of a community and meeting women that way. While that works, it does have some very, very important limitations that we have to discuss. And lastly, we're going to be talking about social skills with girls, also known as game. So yeah, 3 parts. Let's go. Let's start with looks. And when it comes to looks, there are 2 things many guys are saying that are keeping them from getting good daygame results: height and race. The thing with both of these is neither of them you can control too much, but let's still take a look a little bit at each of them. Of course, we're gonna start with height. That's gonna be a shorter conversation. For the most part, unfortunately, you have zero control about how tall you are. And I know, by the way, there are specific shoes that can give you like a few centimeters of height just because of the shoes. There are things like that. And if you wanna go that route, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But the thing I wanna say about height, first of all, of course, height has effect on how women view you, and I think it's like a general fact that women do like taller men. But again, when we talk about sexual market value, there are many equations, and if you lack in one of them, you can gain more in other parts of your sexual market value, and at that point it's not that important anymore. I remember one of the first international daygamers I met when I started daygaming. There was this guy from Portugal coming to Latvia. He was a fairly short guy, and he had a voice problem. He had some sort of a surgery for his lungs some years ago, and because of that he was speaking in a very weird, very high-pitched voice. So he was a short guy with a weird voice. Well, that guy pointed out some of my day game results, especially non-verbals, that really helped my game, and he was getting incredible results. Why? Because this guy, yes, he was short and had some voice problems, and that of course affects his SMV and how girls probably would view him. But no, this guy had great style, grooming. He had, using his style and grooming, he had created this persona that girls saw him as, and he had very good game. He was very social. He really knew how to talk with people. So he offset these negative things by fixing other things, and boom, he was doing very, very good with women. While overall looks are very important in day game, I believe looks are important. I've spoken about this before, but height is just one part of the looks. And we take a guy who's tall but a little bit has like a bigger beer belly and has pretty shitty grooming and style. That guy is gonna be doing worse than a short guy in decent style with decent game and decent grooming. And even if you take out the beer belly of the equation, it's just a tall guy with shitty grooming and very, very average game. Again, a shorter guy who has made sure he has good style, good grooming, and is decently fit and can own his shortness, doesn't feel bad or limited about it. He will really do better. I've seen this over and over again, both with my wings, other day gamers, and students I've coached. Will a tall, good-looking guy with decent grooming do better than a short guy with good style and good grooming? Yeah, probably, but well, you might be short, but there is nothing you can do about it. You have to look at the sum of all parts of the equation. If your results suck, don't look for things to blame. Instead, look for things you can improve, and height isn't one of them, except for a tiny bit with the special shoes. And later we're gonna, again, when we start talking about style and grooming, you're gonna see that it's fairly easy to improve your overall SMV. Now that we've covered height, let's talk about the bigger topic. Let's talk about race. One thing I want to talk about before we get to the topic of race is everyone has a good reason they're not succeeding in game. I haven't heard many black guys mention race as a reason they're not getting results in Daygame. Also, I haven't heard many Asian guys saying that, but I've heard a lot of brown guys telling that their Daygame challenges are rooted in their race. What about white guys? Well, they believe they're too short, not ripped enough, not rich enough, etc. Everyone has a reason their game sucks. Oftentimes, it's a reason that lies outside of your zone of control. Thus, you're not responsible for your result. You're just a victim of being too short, too fat, too poor, too brown, whatever. We're gonna skip all of this complaining and we're gonna look for the real root of these challenges. As I said before, I hear this reasoning mostly from the brown guys. That's what we're going to be talking most about here, but this applies to any race or ethnicity. And brown guy, that's a very broad term, it's an umbrella term, but I'm talking about guys who call themselves brown, and mostly those are guys from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc. And since my credibility is not as great when spitting opinions about experiences daygaming as a non-white guy, I spoke to a few good daygamers who have first-hand experience, and their opinions were very insightful. Most people I've heard complaining about the effect of race on Daygame come from the US, some from the Canada, and others from like a very few other countries in the world, but mostly it's really USA and Canada. And one Daygamer from Canada had an interesting opinion, observation, because he has talked to several, like a bunch of brown Daygamers about this, and his view was that the more politically correct the country is, the more people complain about the effects of race on Daygame, because in a PC country you can complain about everything, and it's this culture of it's basically a culture of complaining about how you're not treated right and how everything is someone else's fault. So that's an interesting observation that he had, that most complaints come from places like that. When coaching brown guys, I noticed that there is a very big difference between guys who have been born in the USA and guys who have emigrated to the USA. And I do have... my observation is that it does come... It does depend on how you've been raised. If you've been raised in with more westernized opinions and views and traditions in your family, that kind of impacts your Daygame in a better way. Whereas if you come from a more traditional upbringing, especially if you have been raised outside of the USA, that does have some effects on your Daygame results. So this brings out the question: what are the differences between guys? They're both brown guys. They're both from the same heritage. From everything is more or less the same. But the difference is, some guys have been raised in the USA with the Western traditions and maybe the kind of the views and everything in their childhood was more westernized, and the others who were born somewhere else and then emigrated. So what are the differences between these guys? Because they're both of these groups are brown, and in terms of race there is no difference. So what are the differences? And here comes the part I was surprised to find out about. I had never thought about this before. One of the guys I spoke to explained his opinion that it's not because of the color of your skin, but because of a few things that guys who have recently immigrated to the USA have brought with them from their home country. I had never thought about it, but when I heard him say it, it made total sense. The bar for looking good and having good grooming and hygiene is much higher in the USA in Europe. Some of the people have not been raised with that in mind just because of different cultural background, especially guys who have recently immigrated to the USA. So again, based on opinions of good brown Daygamers, it comes down to having a good style, having good grooming, and several people pointed out the problem of hygiene. And as always, let's dive a little bit deeper in each of those topics. So style, grooming, and hygiene, and we're gonna start with style. The bar of good style, of looking good, is much, much higher in the USA and Europe, and people who have recently immigrated oftentimes don't really have a deep enough understanding of this. So they might not even understand what to do about it, and if that's the case, I honestly highly suggest getting professional help from someone who can point out the mistakes you're making and really tell you how to improve your style. Almost every time I'm coaching someone, I always suggest them to work with our stylist, Anna, a wonderful stylist I have on my team. She is the girl who is responsible for my style when I started losing hair. She tried to talk me into going bald for several years before I did it, and she has worked with around, I would say, half or even more of the guys I've coached. So if you think that you need help to improve your style, I highly suggest working with her. She is amazing, and I will leave information in the description of this podcast episode how you can reach out to me, and I'll send you all information about how she can help you. And let me tell you one thing, if you are in the US, from the US, then working with her will be much cheaper than working with a stylist from the USA. She's a magician, she really knows how to help guys, and you can talk about Daygame with her. She really is in the know about everything. We're good friends, and she is from Latvia, so it's not gonna cost you 3K to fix your fucking style. And then next, let's talk about grooming. Again, this was pointed out to me by other good brown daygamers. Well, the most important things they pointed out was not really taking good enough care about your hairstyle, your beard, and things like that. These are things that are very easy to fix. You simply need someone who knows what would look good on you, so you can find a good hairdresser, you can find a good barber, and really let them take care of you. And again, if you decide to work with Anna, she will tell you what you should do with your hair and beard as well. And to wrap up this topic about style and grooming, if you have seen Tinder Swindler, and by the way, if you haven't seen Tinder Swindler, you have to see that Netflix, what was that, a series, a movie, I don't even remember. It's about a guy who scammed a lot of girls through Tinder. Of course, he had an incredible game, but he was, of course, a terrible human being, and no one should ever do that. That's not a topic of this conversation. I just wanted to protect myself in case anyone says, oh, you mentioned Tinder Swindler, you think he had a good game, and that's amazing what he did. No, it's terrible. He's a piece of shit. But in that series or movie or whatever, you can see how he looked at the beginning of a movie when he is scamming these girls. He's this good looking, and why I like him as an example, he's a brown guy and he's very good looking with style and grooming and class and everything else. And before you say he had money, no, you can do all of that with no money. You don't have to buy expensive branded clothes, you just have to know what will look good on you. Anyways, back to the topic of the conversation. If you look at him throughout the movie, you will see that in the beginning, while he has money and he's scamming these girls, he is so well dressed and groomed, and his style and everything. He's this really sexy image of a brown guy. And then at the end, when the girls flip everything and scam him and take his money and he is living in hostels, you can see his hair, you can see his beard, and he becomes the opposite, the extreme opposite type of a brown guy with bad hairstyle, with bad beard, bad grooming, and of course, I don't think he would do nearly as good with the girls if he was walking around like that. And when we were chatting about this in our Daygame Church Telegram group chat, a few brown guys chipped in and shared their opinions about that there is a big difference between a geeky and a badly dressed brown guy on a campus and the Indian college DJ who's the cool DJ and goes to these parties, and of course the girls are banging the shit out of that DJ. Now that we have covered two uncomfortable topics, let's talk about one that's even more uncomfortable: hygiene. When I asked people about this, several people pointed out hygiene, about people who went to study to the USA, who have recently immigrated from other places, and that was obviously a big problem for them. They were not aware of it, they didn't know about it, but they did have hygiene problems, which resulted in them smelling not that well. Again, no one likes to bring this up, no one wants to talk about this, I don't want to talk about it, but it's my job to bring this to everyone's attention that this is what people say, these are the problems that some of the people who are recently immigrated in the USA are not aware of. And even though I'm telling this to you, you still might not be able to evaluate this on your own. And while I can comment on your style and on your grooming, that's what I usually do when I coach someone either in field or over coaching calls. Before the first coaching call, I always tell the guys to send me a few pictures or send me their Instagram so I can see what they look like and I can comment on that. But I can't comment on your hygiene unless I really kind of know you in person. But if you are thinking about this, you can simply talk with your closest friends about this and ask their opinions. Of course, make sure these friends are as westernized as possible. The question is, will they answer honestly to you? Because in the US especially, people have this tendency to kind of not be overly direct and not tell things the way they are. But if you are thinking about this and you can't find someone who will give an honest answer, honest opinion, I highly suggest doing that. And now one more topic I want to talk about when it comes to people who have recently immigrated in the USA or Europe. And this isn't only the case for them, but this is also a big problem usually for French people, because French people have a very, very, very strong accent in English. And this also is true about many people who have recently immigrated in the US. Very strong accent. Sometimes the accent is so strong, it's hard for people to understand what they're saying. I had a case where I coached a French guy, and I actually coached him twice, which doesn't happen too often. And after the first time I coached him, I told him that if you want a day game in English, you have to fix your accent, because from some parts of the world, in some parts of the world, when people switch to speaking English, because of how different their language is, they have a very, very strong accent, and others simply can't understand them. And when they can't understand you, especially if their English isn't that great, if you have a strong accent and you're gonna go on day game in places like Poland, for example, where in many cases people speak English, people understand English, but it's not that great. But when you have a strong accent on top of that, that is going to limit your day game results. And when people can't understand what you're saying, they will assume that you're saying what everyone else who looks like you is saying. When I talked about this with Mr. T, he said that in the streets of New York City, if a brown guy or a black guy approaches you on the street, it's very likely that he's either trying to sell you something or he's asking for money. So if you approach a girl and she doesn't understand what you're saying, if you look like a typical guy, like a typical brown guy or typical black guy in streets of New York City, they will assume that what you're saying is the same they've heard from people who look just like you before. So it's your job to make sure there is no way anyone would mistake you for one of those people. You really have to stand out with your grooming and your style. And of course, if your accent is really that bad, you might consider getting an accent coach to help you get rid or at least make your accent less obvious, so people can understand you better and girls know why you approach them. A few years back, I recorded a podcast episode with Mr. T about his experience when he moved and started day gaming as a black guy in New York City. And he explained me just what I told you. He explained how in New York City, people really put you in a box they associate your looks the most with. And he realized that really if a black guy approaches someone on a Broadway, he's usually selling something or asking for money. So he had many bad reactions because of that, but Mr. T realized he has to make sure no one can misunderstand his social status and intentions. He had to dress and look like a successful guy. He changed the way he dressed to a level where there was no way a girl would assume he's trying to sell her something or have any doubts that he's a successful man. His results changed instantly, and I will link that podcast episode together with this one. So, before you say race is the reason you're struggling in Daygame, make sure you've checked off all the other boxes: your style, your grooming, your hygiene, and accent. And two more small things I want to mention when it comes to race. There are so many people of all races in the USA, and I think this is a lot of people haven't thought about it. And because there are so many people of all races, a lot of them have similar feelings to you. Because US has the problem of racism, but because it is such a diverse country, there are many people who feel just like you, and they do not care, at least most of them do not care about what your race is. There are a lot of people going through the same things. But don't get me wrong, of course there are white girls who won't date non-white guys, and there are a bunch of girls from different races who will only date white guys, or they want to date white guys. But the same way, there are a bunch of non-white guys who ask me questions about specifically dating white girls. So there are people with opinions like that, but those people are only a small percentage of the population. At the end of the day, some girls you approach won't like you because you are too short, too tall, too fat, too skinny, too white, black, brown, old, too young, too bearded, too bald, too whatever. There are people who are not gonna like you for whatever reason. There are a bunch of girls who don't like me because I look whatever, too sketchy, I look too scary, I look like that, like tall guy with tattoos and shaved head and a beard and whatnot, and with the seriousness that comes from being from a former Soviet Union country. But that's just a small percentage. What you're doing is you're looking for the girls who don't have problem with you being whoever you are, and then you start applying your game as good as you can. And now let's talk about age, and we're going to be talking about two things. One is, are girls okay with dating older guys? And it will depend on how old you are and where you are daygaming. And the second, we're going to talk about how you look in your age. Let's start with girls being okay dating older guys. I think if you are under 40, in most places in the world, no one really cares if you're under 40. But then when you get over 40, yes, some girls will not like it. Some girls will not be fine with dating you if you are over 40. And then the older you get, the kind of more important it becomes. But you have to understand that that is a part of the equation, that some percentage of girls will not be fine with it, especially if you are approaching girls who are maybe in their early 20s. Maybe that is the reason why guys in their kind of mid to late 40s are doing really good with girls on the second part of their 20s, kind of 28, 29, maybe even early 30s, and guys into their 50s also are doing pretty decent with girls in their late 20s and early 30s. This also depends a little bit on the country. Some countries are have more stigma about the age gap. So if you are in a country like that and you know that your game is good and you have proven that by going to a place where there is no stigma about it and doing really good day gaming there over a decent sample size, so you have real proof that your game is not the problem, and then you go to this country and you see that, okay, you're not doing good there, then it's not just, oh, I'm too old and that's not what I'm doing good in day game. For most people who say that, the problem is their day game and of course also their style and grooming and everything else, but for most people it's just, just as I said before, it's just finding a reason that they can't control. But if you have proof that your game is good and then you want a day game in this place where you live, And there is a lot of stigma about that. Well, you have two options. You can either day game girls that are a little bit older, or you can just go to a different place. You can either go on day game trips, or if you are really seriously considering living this like day game lifestyle and day gaming constantly, and then, well, congratulations, you maybe have to move to some other place. While many day gamers, I know personally many day gamers who have moved to other cities, to other countries to day game, but of course that isn't an option for many people. Not many people are so committed to day game and dating to move to other places. But it is one of the options that you have. And the second part of the conversation about age is how you look, because the better you look, the less important it will be. You can think about, how do you look? Do you look as a like a dad, like a boring guy in hockey pants and some boring shoes, and are you that guy? And obviously, not a lot of girls have fantasies about sleeping with that guy. I mean, some do, but not a lot. Or do you look like a really nice, good-looking, sexy older guy in his 40s or 50s? You can again think about a lot of the guys in Hollywood and how they look in their 40s, 50s, and even 60s. So it's your choice. You can either look like a boring dad or like a really hot older guy. The easiest things to fix are going to be your style and grooming, but there is a difference in improving your style and grooming in your 20s and 30s and then in your 40s and 50s. In 20s and 30s, you can simply go on YouTube, find some videos about how to improve your style and grooming, and it's likely that you might get decent kind of improvements by doing it yourself, but everyone ages differently, and that's why in 40s and 50s, different guys need very different approach to style and grooming. So I would say if you are over 40, I highly suggest improving those things to professionals. And again, I have an amazing stylist on my team who has, as I said, worked with around half of the guys I've ever coached. So if you want her help, then send me an email or send me a message on Telegram and I'll send you all the information about how she usually works with guys. But the other thing that becomes more important the older you get, and that's a little bit harder to fix, is your fitness level, because let's be honest, day game is great. Day game is amazing. It can give you so much. It can give you huge improvements in your dating life, but it's not magic. If you are obese, if you are really, really overweight, you will have to fix it, because that thing brings down your sexual market value very, very much. So if you want to kind of start doing this on your own, I simply suggest checking out the 4-Hour Body by Tim Ferriss. Look at the slow carb diet. That thing, at least for me, worked really well. If you prefer someone beating you with a stick and telling you exactly what to do and keeping you accountable, then we have a guy in our group chat who is actually a professional fitness trainer. If you are in our group chat, simply message me and I'll tell you how to get in touch with him, or simply send me an email and I will connect you with the guy. And the last topic we're gonna talk about is status and money. And let's start with a short conversation about money. Is money important when you're day gaming? I think with money it's very similar than with the size of your dick. As long as it's not too small and tiny and you know how to use it, you're gonna be just fine. And with that I mean that as long as we're talking about short-term dating and just having fun, I don't think money is that important, because I've seen a bunch of day gamers with a lot of money doing great in day game, and I've seen day gamers with very, very, very limited budget doing also incredibly well in day game. But you should be able to take a girl on a date. If you can't take a girl on a simple, cheap date, then maybe instead of, spending money on day game books and stuff like that, maybe fix that first, to be honest. But you don't need a lot of money to take girls on dates, depending on where you're day gaming. If you're day gaming in cheaper places like, I don't know, like the Baltics and Poland and Czech Republic and Hungary, kind of those typical Europe day game trip locations, then you can easily do dates for I would say 15 euro, 15 bucks. And even if you are day gaming in places like New York City, you can be creative and find some cheaper places to take girls to, and you can, I think, do a date for like what, maybe 30 bucks for a really, really, really cheap date if you are creative about it. So you should be able to take a girl on a date in a city where you live. And of course, if you're day gaming a lot and doing good, you're gonna be going on a lot of dates, so it will take some money, but not that much. So when you are just doing day game and having fun and going on dates and sleeping with girls with no intentions on serious relationships, then that's all you need. I don't remember which of those kind of evolution or biology books was talking about it, but there were some interesting opinions there about the importance of money on finding a mate, and this especially was true when we're talking about more than short-term dating. So if you are in your 20s and you're this ambitious, loud guy with these big ideas and dreams and how he's gonna take over the world, then that seemed to be sufficient for younger guys. But when you were over 40 and you were still super ambitious and you're gonna do this and you're gonna do that, but you had nothing to show for that, that wasn't okay when you are over 40. So I think if the book says that, maybe that's right, maybe that isn't. But again, that's more if you are talking about dating someone more seriously. But you have to be careful with money when it comes, like if you are way over 40, maybe you in your 50s and you're going out with girls in their 20s, and you have to be careful that, to make sure they're going out with you for the right reasons. So I would say that the older you are, the more you have to think about not going for fancy dinners, not going to places that are too fancy, not wearing that fancy watch you have and things like that. Just even if you wear a watch, I don't think that's a big problem, but just make sure you're not spending money on these girls before you are sleeping with them. And then a lot of guys have asked me, but I like going out to dinners and to places and doing things with my girl. Like, what do I do that? Why can't I take a girl out for dinner? You can, but my suggestion is doing that after you have slept with a girl. Why? Because for most girls, it's not gonna be that important whether you take them out for a dinner or for a drink. I think a lot of girls are fine with going out for drinks on the first date. And I think if a girl is not fine with you not taking her to a fancy restaurant, I think by not taking her out for dinners, you are filtering out the girls that want something more than just your company, that are dating you for your money. So there's nothing wrong with spending money on girls after you are already sleeping with her, but make sure you don't spend money on them before you sleep with them. In the future, I will record a podcast episode or a YouTube video, I don't know yet, about how to filter out for girls that want your money, the gold diggers and things like that. So, but as long as you're on a mailing list, you're not gonna miss it. I'm just gonna send out an email that I've published that video. So if you are in over 40s and you are a little bit worried about girls playing you for money, or dragging you kind of along a little bit because of your money, then make sure you are on a mailing list so you don't miss that video. And lastly, let's talk about the status, because does status help you get laid? Yes, it fucking does. I used to give lectures about business in different business incubators and places like that when entrepreneurs would kind of show up. And let me tell you that girls in the audience like me, and sometimes I did ask them out and it worked. So, should you use your status to get laid? Well, you have to be careful about this. I actually have recorded a podcast episode. One of the first ones I recorded, it was something about how to get laid with girls from your university, work, business, etc. So just search for that on my YouTube channel. You will find it. And the main ideas is you have to be very, very careful, because you shouldn't obviously use your status if you are a professor at a university or anything like that. It's super easy to get fired. It's super easy to get cancelled. But again, there are environments where I think that is fine, but I think you have to tread carefully. But the one thing I would suggest to be careful about, if you are overusing that and you are doing it a lot, and you can get you can become known as the fuckboy, as the guy who does this all the time. So make sure that it doesn't hurt your reputation, that it doesn't actually hurt your status. That is if you have status. If you are thinking about building up your status, which again, I know guys who are doing this to use that for game, then there is just one problem with that. Unless you are really, really big online, any status that you build, almost any status that you build, unless you are a world level celebrity, but it's, you can build status in like a small place like Latvia, I've coached a guy who approached a girl, the girl rejected him, and then the same girl later the same day messaged him on Instagram, and well, it ended the way it usually ends, So unless you are really, really big on internet, internationally, or some sort of a celebrity internationally, most of the status you will build will be local. So, and as soon as you go to a neighboring country, let's say you are doing this in a super small country like Latvia, as soon as you go to Lithuania, another tiny country, your status doesn't mean anything. And then in bigger places, you might be known in one circle, but then you go to a different circle, and again, it doesn't mean anything. So the big problem with using status for sleeping with women is it's very, very localized. And again, as I said previously, you have to be careful about what type of status you use. You have to kind of make sure that it isn't something you can get fired for. And boom, we talked about different parts of the equation of SMV. And just remember that SMV, as I said before many times, it's the sum of different parts of this equation. And if you are lacking in one thing, you can compensate it with improving something else. And is sexual market value important to get results in Daygame? I think in some ways it is, but when we look at, we basically have options. You can work really hard on improving your sexual market value, or you can work really hard on improving your game. And I would kind of say you have to think about this in a way of 80-20. What 20% of work will give you 80% of results? And when we look at the big picture, yes, there are some things in sexual market value that you should improve even when you're just starting out daygaming. You should fix your style. You should fix your grooming. Those things are very, very important. I think they are extremely easy to fix. They are not that expensive to fix as well, compared to the time you would be spending on daygame. If your time is worth anything, then spend a little bit of time, spend some money on fixing your style and your grooming. But once you've done that, 20% of the work, then you can, you can say, I'm gonna now really focus on improving my SME. I'm gonna make some more money and build a business and become higher status and whatnot. I think then we are hitting the wall of diminishing returns, especially for the beginning. So once you fix those first things in your sexual market value, then it makes much more sense to invest your time more in getting your game better. So then the 80-20 switches to your day game results, and really improving your day game once you have the basics of SMB fixed will give you the best results, the biggest bang for your time, for your money. So I would say go out a ton, fix your day game, and I think it makes sense to go back to improving other things in your SMB like fitness and business and whatnot. Once your game is really, really solid, I would say once you are at 30 day game lays, you have proven that you have really, really good game. And yes, of course, people who have 30 day game lays, they have a lot to improve still. I have so many things I could improve in my game if I wanted to do that. But I think when, again, we look at the 80-20, at this moment, once you are at 30 day game lays, I think you've gotten 80% of what you can out of your game, and then again it makes sense to switch back to working on your SMV, and whether that's improving your fitness and money and happiness in general and all of those things. So start with day game, fix the basics of your SMV, your style, your grooming, then really go hardcore on game. And once you get to your 30 day game lays, it makes sense to again switch back to SMV and max out your SMV. If you are not sure about where you are right now and what to do, and this seems like a little bit too much, then you can simply get a coaching call with me. We can talk about all of this and come up with a game plan. What are the things you need to fix in your style, your grooming, and other things in your SMV, and what parts of your day game you should be focusing on the most. And if you know you need to improve your fitness, your style and your grooming, and you want professional help, then you can work with our stylist Anna, who's a fucking magician. Get in touch with me and I will send you all the information about how she usually works with my students. As I said, I am heading back to Europe mid-April. I'm going to be hanging out in some pretty amazing cities and coaching in a day game in some very nice cities. So if you want to work with me this summer, then there's a link in the description where you can find out everything about how coaching usually works. You can fill the form at the bottom of the page. I'll get back to you with all the details, and then we will hop on a short WhatsApp call to talk more, so you can ask all the questions to understand how coaching with me usually works and if this is the best idea for you. And I will ask you a few questions to understand you better and to see what's the best way I can help you. If you prefer to work on your own and to improve your day game on your own, if you're not planning to be in Europe, then check out the Fast Track Daygamer group coaching program, which, as I said before, has helped already 2 groups of guys really improve their day game results, and everyone who went through the program started getting day game dates. Well guys, that's it for this podcast episode. See you in the next one. Ciao.